All right. Thank you all for being here. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Anissa Hossein-Najad. My pronouns are she, hers, hers, she, her, hers. I'm speaking today from the Koreatown neighborhood of Los Angeles, originally belonging to and still inhabited and cared for by the Gabrielino Tongva people. I'm a brown female-bodied person with short black hair. I am wearing a mask that covers my mouth and it's black. I'm wearing a white t-shirt with light gray vest, and I'm wearing small gold earrings that are you're not able to see because I'm wearing headphones. Before we start, I would like to thank our access providers, Vicky and Bill, who are our ASL interpreters, and Jean, our cart caption providers. We are so excited that you all are here. We cannot wait for the long-awaited Navigating Archival Resources workshop to begin. I know the last thing you want right now is to hear from me, but it will be short and sweet, I promise. We deeply appreciate our diverse and global membership body and are so grateful to have all of you here with us. It is because of our member body that we are able to do what we do best, which is championing a nonfiction filmmaker world everywhere. Before we start, I have some announcements for you. I have a few, on March 29th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we are holding enterprise production office hours for our members only. So please, if you are planning on applying for the enterprise, join us. We would love to have you here. You can sign up for the enterprise member hours by logging into the member portal. If you have any issues with that, email me at anissa@documentary.org. I'd be delighted to help you with that. Another exciting announcement is that the funds team is offering a 2-week extension on the Enterprise Production Fund deadline for IDA members only. So this is an exciting news for IDA members. If you are planning on applying, you have a 2-week extension. Please email funds@documentary.org by Friday, March 31st to request to be added to the Enterprise extension list. I will add this information. Oh yes, it's in the chat already. Please email the funds team. Please keep a lookout for the announcement for members in the member portal. And again, if you have any issues accessing that, reach out to me. I'd be happy and delighted to help you. And now I am delighted and thrilled to introduce my colleague and IDA manager of artist programs, Gabriella Ortega Ricketts. Gabriella is a Colombian-American interdisciplinary artist and filmmaker living in Los Angeles. As an archival producer, her work most notably includes Rebel Hearts, which premiered at Sundance in 2021, and the Andy Warhol Diaries, which was streaming on Netflix at 2022. Gabriella, we are so excited to have you, and thank you.
Thank you, Anissa, for that introduction and for all those announcements. I am Gabriella Ortega Ricketts. I use she, her pronouns. Let's see, I am a white female with a short brown bob with bangs. And I'm wearing a black shirt with green hands with eyes in the middle, and some other eyes and red and purple pattern, and a black background on my shirt. And then behind me is a painting of a scene with some boats, and it's orangey reddish color. A little bit about me. I've been working in the documentary industry, doing archival producing and things like that since 2016. I'm the manager of artist programs at IDA, as Anissa said. I've worked on Rebel Hearts, the Andy Warhol Diaries, and The Cult at the End of the World, which premiered at Sundance this year. Very exciting. As for our agenda today, we're going to have 6 parts to the presentation. First is the approach, where to begin, nuts and bolts. So just very basic things of like where to start. I will be giving you tools and templates, which will be shared with everyone afterward, things to avoid, common challenges, tips and tricks, and then a 30-minute Q&A at the end. For the Q&A, please put all of your questions in the chat. Anissa and Abby, the Director of Artist Programs, will be compiling them for me. And when we get to the chat segment, I will answer those questions that have been compiled. So please, as things come up, please put your questions in the chat. And let's get started. Okay. So again, this is going to be because there's so much to cover, this is going to be a pretty broad covering of things. But where to begin? So when you start your archival project, I guess there are two different angles you could be coming at this from. One is being the director, and one is being an archival producer. And sometimes, I'm sure some of you are directors who want to get kind of more familiar with the archival process, so you have your projects organized well, and you know what you're getting into at the beginning. And maybe some of you are archival producers who are kind of trying to learn more or wanting to get into that part of the business. So if you are a director or an archival producer, you're going to have a few different things. But basically at the beginning, the first thing that you want to do is gather your materials. And if you are an archival producer coming onto a project, that's basically whatever you can get from the filmmaking team. It could be beat sheet, any research notes on the project. If the director or the filmmaking team have a beat sheet or a deck, anything like that, that's amazing. And if you are a director, whatever research that you've done on the subject. If you are an archival producer, it's also good to do your own research, reading books and things like that. And from there, you create a shot list or a list of key terms that you want to research. It's called a shot list, or that's what it's often, archival houses often ask for. It's confusingly named, but when they ask for a shot list, they just mean research terms for you to look at. And so I will be using a mock documentary that I made, my untitled bread making documentary, to kind of lead us through some examples of these things that I will be covering. So when you create a shot list, as I said, that's a list of key search terms to send to vendors and archival houses. Oh, and as I'm going, please feel free to take screenshots of anything that would be useful for you. And I guess one thing I want to say before I get started is that as you are searching for these things and creating your shot list, be open to things changing. So what do I mean by that? You may, going in, have a predetermined idea of what the story is or what you're looking for. But as you kind of get deeper into the archival research process, you may find something that totally changes how you are viewing the project, or might even change entirely what the story is. So be open to that kind of flexibility is what I would say, because I think it'll make your film so much more interesting and dynamic, and less like a preconceived notion, and I think that's a trap that directors fall into a lot, where they have an idea of what it is and then kind of stick to that. Anyway, so once you get the shot list, so here's an example of a shot list. Feel free to put into the chat what you would include for an untitled bread making documentary. I've included bread factories, bread in World War I, World War II, bread during the Irish famine, anything that could come into my mock documentary, untitled bread making documentary. I also learned doing research for this that there had been several bread strikes in England in the 20th century. Very interesting. So once you have your shot list, oh, hello from Brooklyn. Okay. what institutes archival as you are putting together your research and all of your materials? Archival en bref is anything that is not produced by your film team, anything that is not original content. That can be any video, audio clip, newspaper article. So news clips, audio materials like radio shows, interviews, etc., home videos, any sort of visual art, painting, photographs, illustrations, other fiction films, which might be surprising, but that is also archival, correspondence, journals, diaries, newspaper articles. If you have any other ideas of things that could constitute archival, put them in the chat. I want to hear from what you're thinking of, things that you have used yourself that would constitute archival materials. And then where do you research? You know, for all of these things, you can research in very different places. Personal archives are a big one. Archival houses like Getty or ABC, any place that sells or licenses stock footage, news programs, films, audio programs, institutional archives, which are huge and amazing and underutilized resource. Yeah, social media posts as a type of archival material, definitely. University libraries, museums, special collections like the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences has an amazing home video archive. All of these places, which are hugely untapped resources, they have so much of a wealth of information. People often donate their collections to these places, and so they really have a lot. Newspaper, yeah, national, yes, exactly, great. Newspaper archives, you can really get a lot from those. And the internet is a great research, but you have to proceed with caution. It is your friend, but also sometimes your enemy. And more on that in a little bit. So as I said earlier, archival producing is a tool, is a career that people develop over a lifetime. The following is not comprehensive, but is based on my own experience and my own research and just things that I've developed in my career as an archival producer. I will be sharing some spreadsheets and templates and other tools, which will be accessible to all of you after the recording. So for all of the templates that you see, you will have access to those. Yes, newspapers.com, I'm seeing from Cynthia in the chat, is my favorite, one of my favorite websites, and I am not joking about that. It's an amazing resource. Okay, so the most important thing as you go along is to start organized and stay organized. It's really boring, and it seems like a lot of work up front, but it will save you money and it will save you time at the end, and just a lot of heartache and headache. Keeping track of all the materials as you gather them, having a consistent naming convention, other information that will be relevant for licensing, please keep track of that. So many archival producers that I know, like, it just ends up being so frustrating at the end when things aren't organized, because we have to do a lot of like detective work to figure out where things come from. So in terms of organization, and again, this will be shared at the end, but this is a template that I use for just logging materials as I come across them. And so really important things are the description. You know, oftentimes when you order screeners from archive houses, yes, organize, organize, organize. Thank you, Margot. I totally agree. When you get screeners from different archives, they will, you know, give you a description. You can just copy and paste that. If it's from a personal archive and you don't have that, just type in what you see in the film. The production file name, very important. that's just to help you stay organized. And I always like to include the source clip ID in the file name, just in case it gets deleted somewhere along the way, then you have another record of it. Other things that are really bare minimum to keep track of, the copyright holder, which is not always where you get the material. So you want both the copyright holder and the source material, the material source. So if you pulled it from YouTube, or if you pulled it from some Pinterest or something, you want where you got it from, and then also the copyright holder, and then the source clip ID. So when you are getting a clip, we will be sharing all of these templates, so don't worry about that. The source clip ID is a code that archival houses will give you. And that is very important to keep track of, because it lets the archival houses, the vendors, know exactly what clip you are pulling from. I really like Google Docs. It's a big fave. It's free. A lot of archival producers use it. A lot of film teams use it. You could also use Airtable. You could also use something called Archivox, which is a new software being developed specifically to help archival producers and film teams keep track of their archive. Sometimes if you have a lot of footage, it can get a little unwieldy with Google Docs, and it can like slow down and crash. But overall, it's a great resource and very helpful. Okay, so when you're reaching out to archives, what do you need aside from your shot list? You will need your production title, project title, production company, a short synopsis, an estimated budget, the rights required, and a billing contact and address. For rights required, I usually, for the type of films that I do, I usually have all media, all rights in perpetuity worldwide. If you're not going to broadcast, you don't need all media, and that broadcast is pretty general. It's on social media, radio, streaming, on TV. Oftentimes, all media, all rights can cover festivals, but you should definitely double check. If you do limited theatrical or broad theatrical, your costs will go up a lot. With limited theatrical, you should also make sure that how many screens it covers, because for every archive, it's different. So for instance, BBC limited theatrical, I think covers 50 screens, but another place that could cover 500. So you just want to be sure what exactly you're getting from that. Also, most promo rights are separate, and also usually a huge additional cost. But in context, promo rights are typically included in all of these costs, which is basically when you are using, like you're showing a clip from the film and in your promo, and the archival clip is in there. Different archives have different systems. Some have portals that you can search yourself, like Getty, AP Archive, all have portals that you can use. You should still direct, and some archives, you have to just email them directly, contact them directly. You should still always contact the sales agents or the archivists separately, because they will have access to offline clips. This is especially true again for Getty, because they have the BBC and NBC archives at their disposal. So they have all of those offline materials. When you submit your shot list and all of your production information, the archives will send you screeners, breakdowns, which you can then order and peruse at your own discretion. And that's when, you can really find things that are really interesting and amazing. And I really love that part of it, because oftentimes, you're viewing things that not a lot of people have seen, depending on your subject, of course. As an example of a portal, we have Getty, which is like probably, in my view, the easiest portal and archive to search. They've really made it very user-friendly. So you have your home screen, and from here you can choose whether it's editorial image, if you're looking for stock, creative image, they call it, and the same with video. And then, as you go, you just type in your bread making, I'm looking for, just type in your search terms, and you can look for if it's editorial or video. And then from there, you can add things to your board. Oh, you get all the information. It's very straightforward, very easy. You can see the name, the information, the date, the photographer. And then from there, you can add things to your board. And then it just shows you everything that you have collected already, which it's just very handy, very easy. Also, speaking of Getty, sorry, I'm recovering from COVID, so I have a bit of a cough. You should all be active IDA members, and as such, you have Getty benefits. So if you would like to, I think this will be in the chat, but you can email membership@documentary.org. And Anissa will put you in touch with Darlene from Getty Images, so you can redeem a discount and other benefits. But that information should all be in the chat. Very exciting. And these are just some, if you want to screenshot these, if you don't have access to these already, these are some personal favorites of mine for researching. Newspapers.org, which someone mentioned in the chat. Sorry, newspapers.com. I love. It's basically, you can search a very wide database of newspapers from different parts of the world. It goes way back. I love searching newspapers.com because this is not sponsored by newspapers.com. But I do love them. That's a really amazing resource for finding other clips. Like I've found things that are like, on this date, NBC broadcast this thing that is relevant to what I'm looking for. So you can find, and then from there I went to NBC and asked for that one clip that hadn't come up in the research before. So really, you can find a lot of things like that. Footage.net, you can make a request and then archives will reach out to you, which is great. It's time saving and also puts you in contact maybe with archives that you hadn't thought of or you didn't know before. Archive.org, it has a lot of public domain things and other curio. They're really great. It's very extensive archive, both in terms of footage, video, audio, books, pretty much everything. The Library of Congress, amazing resource. A lot of places have donated their collections to the Library of Congress as well. So there's a lot of public domain or free digital materials. They also have a huge offline collection or collection that can only be viewed at the Library of Congress. So it offers more than what you see online pretty significantly. WorldCat, it searches through university archives and can also be a really amazing resource. Again, I think I said earlier, universities have really an amazing untapped resource, or, they're really amazing resources. So I highly suggest looking into university or archives. WorldCat is great. I love WorldCat. And then different library collections like Tessa, which is the Los Angeles Public Library. Digital archives, predominantly photos, or the New York Public Library also has really amazing digital collections. But you can also research this yourself. Okay, once you're in the edit, keep track of everything that you're using once again. And for here, you can, and again, these will be emailed out to everyone and they may be put in the chat as well. But so this is the cue sheet or an EDL, which is basically every shot that you're using, archival shot, and your AE, if you have one, should be able to create this from the edit. And so this is really important to keep track of what you're using while you're using it, and it can help you estimate your budget costs and also inform who you have to reach out to for licensing, and also keeping track of anything that you want to fair use, mastering status, all of that. So really important things to keep here. And again, you can copy and paste a lot of this from your footage log, as we've already discussed, which is here. So a lot of this can just go straight into this. Your file name, that's for you to help keep track. That's what you have in Avid or when you download materials. The description, this is what you are seeing on screen. So if it's from a video that you've screener, it's not a description of the whole video, it is what you are seeing on screen. The source clip ID, which again tells vendors, archival houses, exactly what clip you're pulling from. And then the burn-in time code, which is the time code that appears on the screen when you are in a screener. So whatever the archival house gives you, for some places you don't need this, like Getty currently licenses by clip, so you don't need this for Getty, but for BBC, for NBC, ABC, most archival houses, they will require the burn-in time code, because that lets them know exactly what part of the screener you want to pull and master. So for archival houses, again, the most important things that you really should not lose are the source clip ID and the burn-in time code. And again, you also want the copyright holder, which is not always where you get the materials from, but you want the copyright holder and also where you pull the materials from. You'll see in the document, the template shared, there's also columns for credits and also for licensing costs. So you can put the rates that you received from the archive houses in there, and that just kind of helps consolidate everything. And again, keep you organized. I love organization. When you work on a budget, I've also shared this template. And so when you're working on the budget, it's a very, very helpful template because it does all of the work for you, basically. You can, it will kind of add everything up automatically in the formula. So you just put in licensing amount. Some places will have minimums. So, if you can see it for British Pathé, it says I'm using 12 seconds, but they have a 90-second minimum. So then it calculates by the minimum if there is one. So then obviously that would be a lot of money. So I will repeat this later, but when you are estimating your budget, things you want to keep track of or want to include as well beyond this are also beyond the actual licensing cost for clips or second, you also want to include any sort of lab fees. Like BBC has, I think, a $250 lab fee for getting masters. A lot of places do. Or if you're using personal archives, you might digitize the footage yourself. So you'll want to include that in the cost as well. And also if you are licensing from personal archives, that's another thing to consider when budgeting, when licensing, how much footage you will, be, or I guess when you're licensing from personal archives, that's something else to keep in mind. How much, how you negotiate the rate with whose footage it is. There's no straightforward answer to that, but I do think it's important to pay people when you're using their personal archives. Really depending on how much you're using and also if they own the material themselves. But I do think that's an important thing to keep in mind. About licensing rates are going up pretty exponentially, which can really hurt independent projects. But if you can always try to negotiate. I definitely think you should negotiate. Independent projects will receive more favorable rates, and sometimes archival houses can be, amenable to that, but not always. Sometimes they're pretty stringent, especially if they think you have a bigger budget. you know, when you get your original quote from them, make sure you keep track of that, so then they don't try to raise it later. You know, you can be like, hey, this was my quote from you however long ago when I started this project. Can you still honor this even though your rates have gone up? Because sometimes these projects, I mean, sometimes projects last for many years, and when you get the quote, you know, it's a few years before you're actually in the licensing stage. Okay, so when you're licensing, as I've said, the archives will ask for the burned in time code, the clip ID, a description of the clip. And sometimes if you're using a reporter or any sort of premium footage, anything for NBC, for instance, anything with like an NBC bug or an interview, they will ask for or any sort of talent. And a talent is, again, anchors, reporters, presenters of any sort. They will ask for the clip to be in context. So that's to make sure that, you know, you're presenting the clip in a kind of a honest way, that it actually is relevant for what you're doing, that you're not changing what the anchor is saying, for instance. And so you'll probably need either 30 seconds before or after the clip, or sometimes they request a minute before and after the clip. And that's just, they're very specific about, yeah, how their talent is being used. I think understandably in a lot of ways, because they don't, you know, they don't want you changing things when they should not be changed. You'll submit a master order form using all of that information. So here's one from Kino Library, which is another archive that I really love. You have the clip reference or a source ID, that's the same thing. Time code in and out, and that is, again, the burnt in time code. So if you see this photo, this image right here, it's 00010500. That is the burn in time code, and that shows you that shows the archives exactly what clips that you want. It does have burn in time code in the clip, and then a brief description, again, just exactly what is on screen. Okay, now we're going to go into what to avoid. Many things. Disorganization. First of all, just pulling clips from the internet. Try not to avoid it. I know that a lot of editors really love, you know, while they're working, they're just searching things that they need, and they're in a moment of creativity, and then they end up pulling a lot of things from Pinterest or Tumblr or YouTube or Google Images without any record of where it comes from. This is really frustrating for archival producers and for directors, because then you have to go through the process of figuring out where things come from, which can be very time consuming and sometimes impossible if the page has been deleted. You do have some tools that can help you, like TinEye is really great, or, you know, reverse Google image search, but it can really, it causes, like I said, a lot of heartache, a lot of headache, and just adds unnecessary work at the back end of things when you could have just had it all organized from the beginning. Similarly, cutting in sequences or any clips from pre-existing documentaries. So again, you may be watching a documentary and you love one of the clips that they're using, and so you grab it from there. The problem is, once you are licensing the footage, you have to go back and kind of do research into where that clip comes from, which again can be very time consuming and very frustrating. I would propose instead looking at the credits of the film and reaching out to those archive sources that are listed in the credits of the film that you are watching. And that also opens you up to finding different materials, because when you're pulling something that's already been used in a film, that's someone else's view, that's someone else's vision of what they found interesting, instead of what you find interesting or what could be more relevant. You're using someone else's editorial mindset instead of making your own decisions. And also, oftentimes the same clips end up getting used over and over and over again. And it's really, I think it just is much more interesting if you find something different, you know, and make your own decisions. And this is kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about being open to things changing, you know, be open to exploring something new. Okay. Losing the source ID, please don't do that. That's why I always have it both in the spreadsheet and then also in the clip name. Just you want as many records of it as possible, because sometimes it will accidentally get deleted. And then again, you have to end up doing like detective work to try and figure out where it came from. And all of this, again, is just to save you time and money and heartache and headache, as I keep repeating, because it can really, you just can end up pulling your hair out trying to find where things come from. And just like screaming to the universe. And then a really big one is frankenbiting. Do not frankenbite. I do have some little silly examples of what frankenbiting is, but basically frankenbiting is taking things out of, is like when you take a clip and rearrange what people say to kind of make it suit your narrative, which is bad ethically, I think. And also a lot of archival houses won't let you do that, especially for news clips. So when you know, if you do that and then you submit a clip to be approved, for instance, from ABC or NBC, and they see that you've rearranged what someone has said, they'll say, you can't do this, you have to undo it. And sometimes it's annoying. You know, there are things that you can do, like if you're trying to condense something, or someone says something that's not relevant and you want to just like remove it from the second, but you're kind of from the segment, but you're still preserving the basis of what they said. Sometimes you can make arguments for that, but you cannot change what people are saying, or you should not change what people are saying. You know, I do think documentary filmmakers, you know, you are oftentimes putting out something that people view as like, not always, but view as like a record of history in some ways. And so I think we do have a duty to kind of preserve what people say, because if people, you know, watch something and then you've changed it to suit your narrative, they're going to think that that's what the person actually said instead of what they did say. So here's a clip. This is unedited. Well, it's unedited news clip about bread, about flour.
President Biden is.
So I'm gonna just a little frankenbiting clip so we all get an example.
Said the war will create food shortages because Russia and Ukraine are among the largest producers of wheat in the world. So we wanted to know if it's a window of opportunity for Colorado farmers. Denver 7's Veronica Acosta found out it's a balancing act between a lot of different factors, though.
It is, and we actually visited Calcivic Farms, which has been around for more than 100 years. It is a multi-generational business that mainly grows wheat. Now, recently, the wheat commodity price, that has gone up. And while that is great news, there are so many other factors that farmers like the Calcivics are dealing with right now.
Farmers should be dancing and celebrating, and it is a great thing. And we want to spin that as a wonderful thing that's happening at the expense of someone else. But along with that increase, we've also seen previous to this market increase, fertilizer costs going up by 400% if you can get it. Price of fuel, we've all seen that at the fuel stations, right? When we're filling up, that's hitting our situation as well.
Okay, so that's the original clip. And then this is kind of the frankenbiting clip, recontextualizing what has been said.
President Biden has said the war will create food shortages because Russia and Ukraine are among the largest producers of wheat in the world. So we wanted to know if it's a window of opportunity for Colorado farmers.
It is, and we actually visited Calcivic Farms, which has been around for more than 100 years. It is a multi-generational business that mainly grows wheat. Now, recently, the wheat commodity price, that has gone up.
Price of fuel, we've all seen that at the fuel stations, right? When we're filling up, and we want to spin that as a wonderful thing that's happening at the expense of someone else. That's hitting our situation as well.
So you heard it there. This business has been around for decades, and they're not stopping now.
So as you can see, it's just recontextualizing. That's not at all what you said in the original clip. It's a little silly example, but I think it illustrates frankenbiting. Like, just don't do it. It, again, all of these things, they just create a lot of headache when you're coming around to licensing. And I do think there's also an ethical component. Someone in the chat mentioned deep fakes. And yeah, that's, I mean, a very scary thing to me. Don't do that either, you know? Okay, so common challenges, kind of, a lot of this I've said already, but you know, just it all bears repeating. Sometimes there is no archival of the moment that you're looking for. That's okay. Just like you shouldn't frankenbite to make something that you want to have been said that maybe wasn't actually said. Don't create, I mean, unless you're, you know, doing like a recreation or animation, I'm not going to speak to that, but don't try to create archival moments that don't exist. That again goes along with frankenbiting quite a lot. And also deep fakes. Speaking of deep fakes, sorry. Archival costs are going up quite exponentially, as I said. Again, negotiate as much as you can, but it is becoming increasingly difficult, unfortunately, for independent filmmakers, I think. But there are ways to work around that, you know, like, again, as I said, public archives and institutional archives are often have a lot either free-ish resources or at least cheaper resources. Another thing is that, just something to note as you work with archival houses, that places like Getty or Critical Past, they have a lot of public domain footage that they don't list as public domain footage. So things that are older, you know, especially in the early 20th century, might be public domain. You can always get a copyright search done. For film and music and TV, that's a lot easier to do because everything has like a name. But yeah, copyright searches are really helpful when trying to figure out who the copyright owner is of certain things, or if you have like a title, not if you're just looking at a random clip. Yeah, that's a very helpful thing to do to figure out if it's the copyright has been renewed or if it is public domain. You may have to, as I said earlier, you may have to digitize your footage yourself, especially working with personal archives. This is something that you should build into your archival costs, as I said earlier. You know, just it could also look good, you know, if you're aware of that when you're applying for grants and things like that, you're thinking of that. Archival house mandates, internal mandates. This is also something that is really becoming a bigger issue. And we are going to have an event about this in a little over a month, I think. A lot of archival houses are increasingly closing off their archives and what is licensable. So for instance, ABC, you can only license their premium footage currently if you are an ABC Disney project, so that they won't even let you look at their footage unless you are an ABC or a Disney project. The premium footage, they will let you look at B-roll or the non-premium footage, and they'll let you license that. It's actually a little less strict than it was a few years ago, but yeah, so that's like a huge segment, a huge portion of their archives that they can't let you look at. Places like NHK in Japan, they might not want you to license certain things that kind of make the country or the government look bad, which I have encountered before with NHK specifically. Yeah, just have a realistic budget. Also, again, I can't stress this enough. People often underestimate how much they're going to be used, like how much things are going to cost. So really use that budget template, keep track of costs as they go. You will probably end up spending more than you think you're going to, unless you're doing a lot of like public domain stuff, in which case you won't. And again, licensing for theatrical is really going to make your costs go up a lot. So that's something to consider. If you're licensing for you should also always make sure that you have festival rights. Or if you are screening at a festival, you should license your material too. Like, don't think because you're at a festival, you shouldn't license your material. You should license it, and you can just clarify that it's for festival only. If you've started license, you can always go up as well. So like, if you want to start off doing festival only rights, and then maybe if you get a distributor, you can then go back to the archives and get like more, you can say, oh, now we want to add theatrical to that. You can do that if you're trying to preserve costs up front. Okay, some little tips and tricks. B-roll. You cannot fair use B-roll. Please don't fair use B-roll or try to fair use B-roll. Your fair use lawyer will say you can't fair use this. And then you'll have to go license it anyway. Newspapers, you can fair use, especially if you have to recreate them, but you can fair use newspapers. And again, a really great resource. I love newspapers.com, as I will speak about it till the end of my days. Build digitization costs into your budget. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but it bears repeating. Keep track of the source IDs and burn in time code. Another thing is to try to avoid minimums. So as I was saying, a lot of archival houses, they'll have like a 90-second minimum, a 60-second minimum, 30-second, 45-second. They will have a minimum number of seconds that they want you to license. Sometimes they'll waive them or they'll lower them. So recently, British Pathé was working on, I was maybe going to license from them. They had a 60-second minimum, but then they offered to lower it to 45 seconds. But you can still, you can have them lowered. There is a little bit of wiggle room sometimes. But I would say if someone has a 30-second minimum and you're only licensing 2 seconds of footage from them, you will still have to pay for 30 seconds of footage. So one thing you can do is just replace that footage with somewhere else that you're already licensing materials from, or someplace that doesn't have a minimum. Or you can say, all right, I'm now going to license 28 more seconds or even 20 more seconds of material from this one archive house, so that I don't end up paying for licensing seconds of footage that don't exist, because, and if you stay organized and you have your budget, you can kind of see how much you're using from all of these different places, so that when you get to actual licensing, it's all laid out. A lot of times this kind of goes out the window because projects aren't organized or they're rushing to meet a deadline. So they end up just trying to license as much as possible really fast. But it's something to try to avoid, especially if you are on a tight budget. So just really, again, I can't stress enough being organized throughout the project. And then again, as I said, be open to things changing, be creative with your research. Oh yeah, being creative with your research. There are lots of places, like I said, footage.net, the Library of Congress, University Archives really are all amazing resources. And then just like change spellings of things, because a lot of the times there are typos, and it sounds like such a basic thing, but I've found so many things just by like misspelling a name, and well, intentionally, but like just trying variations of spellings of things, and things will come up and you're like, that's not how it's spelled, but it will still come up because the people logging these things are, they're people, and people make mistakes. So sometimes that can work in your favor. And yeah, be open to things changing. Sometimes that can be you know, difficult to communicate to directors if you're an archival producer, but especially if you're working with a difficult personality or someone who has their mindset about something. But, you know, I think it's an important thing to try to communicate as much as possible. And I would frame it, if you are in that position, as just like, you know, what I said before of, you have an opportunity to find something that someone else has never found. You have, like, it will make your film more interesting, more dynamic, more personal if you are, you know, open to things kind of influencing your film instead of kind of cherry picking things along the way. Oh, we're actually gonna end a little early with my presentation. So we're gonna spend the next, I guess, 37 minutes doing a Q&A. So I hope you have all been putting your questions in the chat, and you can continue to do so. Again, if you want to take advantage of your Getty membership, you can email Anissa, our lovely membership manager, at membership@documentary.org. There's also a landing page for IDA members that Getty created with some information. So you could check that out. If we don't answer your questions in the next, 35 minutes or so, I will be compiling them into a Q&A that I'll put online. We will again be sharing all of these resources online. This is being recorded, so everything will be available online to all of you.